The automotive industry is at an inflection point. Software-defined vehicles, electrification, and intelligent vehicles for future. One company that is at the center of this transformation is Bosch, at 3.8 billion euros in India, employing over 39,000 associates, defining vehicles for India and also for global markets. To talk about how the company is evolving its game plan to cater to future disruption, we have with us Mr. Sandeep Nelamangala, Joint MD of Bosch Limited and President of Bosch Mobility India. Sandeep, thank you very much for talking to Autocar Pro.
Thank you very much for being here.
Help us understand, how is Bosch evolving its India footprint? A lot of talk about AI, software-defined vehicles, electrification, yet the internal combustion engines are not going anywhere. What do you think?
Well, like you rightly mentioned, the mobility industry as a part of the bigger holistic view of the tech industry is in an inflection point. From a point of view of technology, from a point of view of geopolitics, point of view of user requirements, whichever lens you look at, there is a big impact change, and there's also an inflection point. Like you mentioned, we are 3.8 billion euro whereabouts enterprise in India, and we contribute with this to about 3 to 4% of Bosch's global turnover. A majority of this business in India comes from the domain of mobility. And in the mobility space, we contribute to about 5% of Bosch's global mobility turnover. On the software front, I think we are the biggest software development center outside of Germany, and we employ upwards of about 20,000 people. We have traditionally been very strong in India in the space of automotive technology, be it powertrain solutions, safety, and electronics. And we are a technology or a technology neutral company, and we support multiple fuels in powertrain. We support multiple domains within safety, and supported by almost a completely localized software and electronic hardware development. So that's been the progression.
That's a wide gamut of what you offer to the Indian automotive industry.
Of course. I mean, we traditionally come with a very spread portfolio of products, services, and solutions. And we expect to continue to make a significant impact on the way people and goods are moved in this country.
It's a complex environment, different kind of segments you cater to, and different parts of the value chain that you cater to. How do you bring simplicity in this complex environment, market environment, and even within your own organization, you cater from end to end? There's a restructuring that has taken place. Help us understand, how is Bosch evolving its internal footprint and how it goes to market?
I think you made a very important point on how do we drive simplicity in this complex technical landscape. Traditionally, we have been structured in terms of market segments, right? We have let's say we have a part of the organization more dedicated towards looking at the heavy duty market, light duty, passenger cars, two-wheelers, three-wheelers. And that's worked pretty well for us. But going forward, I think it's more your ability to work on horizontal planes because technology will be very seamless between the various segments. And that is where we earlier spoke about the so-called tech stack as well, that we have so far been pretty good, and we've been market leaders at the layer of sensors, actuators, hydraulics, you call it fuel injection equipment, or electronic controls, or safety systems. That's the domain where we have been extremely strong at.
Right.
And we are divided into business divisions, and each business division has its functional competence and capabilities, which was fair.
Right.
But going forward, it's more about our ability to identify horizontals, be it in software, be it in compute, be it in operating systems, and the ability to go right from sensors, actuators on the bottom of the tech stack pyramid all the way up to cloud connectivity,
Right.
regardless of what application you're talking about. It's a little complicated to explain this, but this is an essential element in adapting yourself to what's happening in the industry.
Must be a challenging ask. Your eyes on the market, which is dynamic, volatile, from double-digit growth to where you're now to single-digit growth, and at the same time you have to implement this internal organization. Now, help me understand when you look at the future and when you look at India's role for Bosch. How do you see role of India from a global scheme of things? You mentioned about softwares; that's a very critical element. Exports from here, sourcing from here. So, role of India in global scheme of things, and how do you see Bosch India growing here?
Like I mentioned earlier, while we contribute to about 5% of mobility business to the Bosch's global mobility scheme of things, our aspiration is to double that by the turn of the decade. And this comes on the back of the changes we will see in the technology landscape in India, partly driven by legislation, partly driven by user requirements, and also driven by the Government of India's initiative to improve efficiency and utilization of mobility in the country. So we intend to double our contribution to Bosch global mobility business by end of the decade. I think a lot depends also on the kind of technology transitions we are seeing happening around the globe, namely the electrification of powertrain, which is a trend we expect will also catch up in India. And our estimate at the moment is 1 in 4 vehicles by 2030 would have some form of electrification.
Not BEVs per se, but some form of
Some form of electrification, partly BEVs and partly also some level of hybridization, if you will. Hydrogenization in the heavy duty segment is another trend which we will be pivoting on. And the significant change we would see in the compute space, where we will see the cars getting more intelligent, cars getting more centralized in terms of their compute abilities, and the features which go along with it.
Right.
Driver assistance, as an example. So these are, let's say, fundamental building blocks. What we should also not forget or ignore is, while all this focus on vehicle as a technology carrier, there are many things which will happen in the ecosystem as well. V2X is one thing which you often hear about. I think that's also a domain of focus for us. And last but not the least is our focus on utilization and efficiency. And there is a lot which can be done in this country to help address the initiative of the Government of India as well. I mean, you've heard about Gati Shakti, ULIP, and those are areas where we would be focusing on.
Doubling of India contribution is a very bold call, and the Indian market is slowing. Did it come as a surprise to you? And how do you ride this volatility? Because one was expecting sustenance, but the 2 years of a low single-digit growth, and even the projection for passenger vehicle appears to be of a single digit, yet you want to grow much faster than what the trajectory is. What would be the key drivers for you?
See, a couple of points. Cyclicality is not something new. Right? We've all been through these cyclicality phenomenon, if you will, the last years and decades. While growth in numbers is one fundamental aspect, I think it's the content per vehicle which will be the bigger driver
Absolutely.
in terms of any company's aspiration in the mobility, in participating in the mobility space. Our expectation is that if you look at a target accessible market, we would easily see 3 to 4 fold increase in the total target accessible market of mobility in India.
Wow.
Now, we can keep discussing whether it takes 5 years to get there or 7 years to get
Right.
there. But if you look at all the technology changes which is happening globally, especially in China, I think this would kind of come to our doorstep very soon.
So do you think one has to kind of review the way one looks at future growth projections? It's more qualitative in nature rather than more number-centric or volume-centric, you feel? Given the fact that you yourself are talking about a sort of a value per vehicle going up significantly.
True. I think the value proposition cycles will get much shorter now, right? Of course, there are some technologies, for example, if you take hydrogen, this would have a certain implementation cycle time. But anything you see in the electronic space, in the compute space, in the new software-defined vehicle space, the business cycles get much shorter. So when you envisage certain trend for the future, you have to work in scenarios, right? Because there is nothing deterministic, there is nothing very certain.
Right.
Nobody commits you long-term volumes and
You got a plan A, plan B, plan C.
Exactly. So it's more about criteria and assumptions, shorter cycles, have a DevOps cycle or a DevSecOps cycle. These are new things which we are getting used to. In the software world, this was more or less a norm for a long time, but this is now creeping up in the rest of the space as well.
From the last time we spoke, a lot has changed globally. The geopolitical environment is in a flux right now with talks of reciprocal tariff, and probably it opens up the world. What's Bosch's view with regards to global trade, and how would you see this entire flux that we are seeing in the global economy? Does India stand to gain out of this thing? Because there's a talk of EU FTA as well. Your home base is in Germany, and probably the tariffs in US are much lower, and it opens up opportunity for Indian auto component makers to export to US as well. I mean, how do you see this global scenario? While it's all in a flux right now, but at the end of the day, India stands to gain, you feel?
Like you mentioned, I think at this point in time, there is a great deal of flux in this. And if you look at what's happening globally in terms of the trade relationship between US and the rest of the world, and the way China is positioning itself, I think there is still a lot to be mapped and followed up in this space.
I understand.
Of course, we are in discussion on how to position India in this evolving value proposition.
Right.
And I believe that this will definitely open up a lot of opportunities for us, be it in the component space or subsystem space as well. But like I said, we need to observe, we need to work on this. Possibly we would have more clarity on this in some months to come.
Right. So be it protected environment or an open environment, how do you as a company evolve your footprint, or how agile can you be? What are the levers that you can have in your control to cater to this uncertain external environment?
There is no easy recipe to this, Ketan.
Yeah.
And the only way for us to survive this new environment is to develop the capability in the organization to think scenarios,
Right.
to think criteria assumptions,
Right.
and shorter cycles to keep validating your assumptions, and of course data,
Right.
and the ability to synthesize data and bring it back into your decision-making loops,
Right.
in order to make sure that whatever you decide is in the direction of a right decision.
Right. So speed, agility, and flexibility is what you need to imbibe in
And
you.
data.
And data. So again, talking of data, we've often heard data is the new oil, right? How do you see data and its impact on the automotive industry globally and in India? And attached to that is artificial intelligence and software-defined vehicles, because that's calls for a lot of data computing. Help me understand this, dynamic world of AI, ML, and what role data is going to play.
Well, let's try to take a few steps back into the tech stack, and that is where the whole genesis starts, because in the past, or even if you take the classical business process today, um, there was a lot which was designed as a hardware plus approach, and a lot of software came embedded,
Right.
and that had its advantages. But when it comes to a user experience demand now, that you would have more UX related flexibility to be given to the user,
Right.
you would definitely need much shorter cycles, right? And that is the fundamental of the genesis of the so-called software-defined vehicle, where software basically defines a template about how the electrical and electronic architecture of the vehicle gets designed. So it's kind of outside in process. Now this is a very big mindset shift, if you will, because you need the organization to get used to such short cycles, and hardware in the future would get more standardized,
Right.
in that process. The other complementing part of this is data.
Right.
So while you take care of the fundamental philosophy of SDV, what helps you stay ahead of the curve in the market is your ability to synthesize data, your ability to assimilate that into value proposition, and your ability to monetize. So these are the three blocks of data. It's easier said than done. It's a journey.
Yeah.
And then everything, of course, will be very regional, very hyper local. There are certain data points which are also of help globally.
Right.
And we as a company are very well positioned to leverage that, because we have data streams and access to the whole of the globe. But it's also very important to look at hyper local tendencies,
Right.
and our ability to extract data, synthesize, and monetize that. Right? That's the cycle.
How I mean, we are at a very early stage of implementation of AI, ML, and I mean, it closely links to the electronics and the SDVs. Help me understand, where are we in the journey? How are you intending to monetize it or utilize it in making Bosch stronger? The role of AI, at what stage are we in the evolution? How do you see it evolving in the future, and how does Bosch India intends to capitalize on it?
I think the earliest impact of AI, ML, and its implications and impact on the whole development cycle would possibly be seen in the software area. And we had a certain traditional coding methodologies and practices, and they would obviously get impacted by AI and ML. Of course, this would lead to much higher efficiency gains to start with. But while that is the starting point, I think what is more important is to see how does this help us in long-term understanding of the ecosystem, faster understanding of the ecosystem, faster generation of data synthesis, because it's all a question about speed and your ability to take value propositions to the market in very short cycles.
Right. Right.
So while efficiency is going to be the starting focus, and you've possibly would have heard many companies speak about this, but I think the end game is more about how are we able to influence user requirements in the market, how fast and how meaningful.
Are there risks associated with it? A lot of talk about how AI, ML could potentially take away jobs. but there's also the view of how it can be utilized more and have more humans delivering efficient work. How do you
I
see
think
this?
it's more to do with a balance and more to do with where do we focus as the key value propositions. There is a great deal of data synthesis um, and let's say data manifests which can be brought to the table, uh, but the but how do we basically analyze that into a certain use case,
Right.
what we are used to? That is the value we need to move into.
Right.
And the value so far about the fundamental coding itself will get diluted with this process.
Right.
But then our challenge is to move the organization into a much higher value proposition.
Help me understand in that context, how is the software arm evolving itself? 19,000 engineers is what you mentioned, right? So is there a need for a constant upskilling of those existing workforce that you have? And what about getting right workforce from the market, which is actually attuned to this rapid change?
Upskilling is a factor which is not only specific for software, but upskilling is applicable for the entire spectrum of the
Yes.
mobility business space now.
Right.
And every function is impacted by the AI and your ability to access large amounts of data.
Right.
Of course, there are some functions like we spoke about in software which are more in the front end.
Right.
But I wouldn't exempt even a manufacturing function way
Down the line.
down the line in
In
the
the value
value
chain,
chain also to get impacted. So upskilling for us is going to be a very, very important criteria. And your whole L&D journey, learning and development journey also has to be completely repivoted.
Right. So there's a piece of Bosch in every possible connected vehicle around the world is something that we understand. So what role can the base here play in terms of contributing to the change that is happening globally in terms of connected vehicles, SDVs, electric vehicles? How do these software engineers contribute to the global responsibility?
Well, there is a great deal of work which we have been doing in supporting Bosch with platform development, platform testing, platform validation, which would obviously continue. Uh, for instance, there are roughly about 2,500 engineers here doing software work on ADAS, which is support to the global technology. This would definitely continue. The question is, are there technology domains which would evolve and pilot in India, and then you have solutions which are developed here,
India for the global.
and then you either take them if there are similar user conditions elsewhere, or you make it modular so that you have a baseline and then you add up regional requirements thereof. These are things which we are working on.
Right. Let's talk about the future and how do you see the growth ahead? Even as I asked you about volume versus value, how do you see the market landscape, individual segment wise? How do you see it evolving, and what would be the key drivers of growth that you'd be looking at? Because you have specific solution for two-wheelers, three-wheelers, for passenger vehicle and commercial vehicle. Let's look at 5 years from now. What are the key drivers of growth for Bosch in India?
Mhm. I think the fundamental growth driver for us would obviously be the automotive market and volumes of vehicles thereof, and the growth trajectory until the end of this year can always be a debatable issue, plus minus. Our focus is twofold. One is, of course, on this volume growth, the content per vehicle, which is driven more by technology, legislation, or simple user preferences. But we are also trying to focus more on DPKM and BTKM, to really understand what is the potential of mobility in this region. And we are, for instance, we've just a year ago launched our digital mobility platform, focusing more on partner-led approach to the market to solve problems of efficiency and utilization. So these are multiple ways of approaching the mobility challenge in the market.
Right. If you could just explain what is that BBKM, BBKM?
Well, it's simple. It's billion passenger kilometers on how people move and billion ton kilometers on how goods move. So one part of the BPKM and BTKM, of course, is relevant from the number of vehicles which make it happen. But many aspects with regards to multimodal mobility, with regards to the expenses from fuel, expenses from parking, expenses from tolling. I mean, these are bigger aspects of the ecosystem, and there's a lot to do in utilization and efficiency.
So you move beyond just supplying parts and solution to be part of the overall life cycle of ownership, either the consumer end.
Absolutely.
So would that call for a separate organization that looks at it, or I mean, the way you approach it?
Yes, we have a separate legal entity set up in India to work on such a partner-led neutral e-commerce marketplace, and that's the way to go, because we will not be able to do and influence everything by ourselves. So that's more a partner ecosystem play, and that's something which we have started the last, I think, couple of years now.
How has that been the initial couple of years? How has been the response?
Well, we have pivoted that with one hyperscaler, and our digital platform is now live in India, EU, and North America, because you need a global reach in that. And I think the initial experience we have had in the domains of fleet management, trucking management, parking has been pretty successful.
Right. And from a personal mobility space, how do you see the impact of shared mobility? Since you spoke of telematics in the commercial vehicle space, I mean, there was a lot of talk post-COVID about how personal mobility is back with a bang, and now we're back to normalcy again, and shared mobility is coming back. Fleet market is growing. Again, the question mark whether there's a need for a second car in the family. Replacement cycles are getting extended. How do you see the shared mobility space, and how do you see the ability space per se evolving from a personal to shared mobility space? I mean, how do you see the overall mobility space evolving?
Well, on the personal mobility, we did have significant conversations on shared mobility, also kind of exaggerated during the COVID times as well, and then, like you said, it went through a cycle of dip. In terms of connected mobility, I believe we will see a greater traction and acceptance in the commercial vehicles, because there is an efficiency gain which is here and now. But whereas in the passenger mobility, it's more to do with connectivity in the personal ownership space now. And that's a discovery journey we are going through with all the new launches. But in terms of getting back to multimodal mobility in the personal space, that's something which we have to observe.
Right. No conversation is complete without talking of net zero future, electric mobility. I mean, there's a lot of talk in Europe, and there's already sort of a U-turn to internal combustion engine. The hard stand of 2035 appears to be that it might be relaxed. North America is having a different stand. Japan actually looks at hybrid as a future. You spoke of multiple bridges along the way. How do you see the future of powertrains? And how do you think India will evolve on that landscape?
Mm. Well, I think it's going to be pivoted on what the government of India would want to achieve in terms of reducing the dependence on import of crude and also making the environment more acceptable in the metros, right? While also trying to address the aspect of decongestion, etc. So that's the holistic view of what needs to be achieved. And in that journey, like I mentioned, we are a technology neutral company and we are supporting multiple fuel approaches to this problem statement, be it advancements in gasoline and diesel powertrains, hybridization, battery electric vehicle, of course, the transitional fuels, be it CNG, LNG, ethanol, or the true north in long haul transport, which is the hydrogen, be it in combustion form or in fuel cell form. So we are kind of spread in our portfolio towards this uh, complete bouquet of offers. Now, what finally gets accepted in the ecosystem in the industry would be a combination of many factors, right? Cost being one, user experience being the other, infrastructure being the other. But we are positioned to support the industry, support the OEM in whichever way I think we find more appropriate for the region.
So this global technology capability lies with Bosch. With regards to India, how localized will they be, whichever way the market moves? What is the stress on localization here?
Well, I think we have an extremely strong engineering and manufacturing footprint traditionally in India. So, regardless of what technology we are speaking about, um, we will have we will continue to have that footprint
Right.
continue.
What's the average localization levels like?
Well, I think in the traditional classical business, we would have localization upwards of 70-80%. But in the newer technologies, of course, that needs to be analyzed because of
Depending on the volume.
depending on the volume and depending on certain material, we would have various varied um, localized or domestic value add content. But that's analysis which is continuously.
Just a couple more things, Sandeep, before I wrap up. First is India was always a global champion when it came to value engineering and low cost solutions for the global market. And I think, we had fantastic ABS solutions for two-wheelers out of India from a safety stack perspective. And of course, the software engineers here were working on global solutions. When you look at the future, what are the capabilities where India can actually take care of global responsibility or can put its hands up and say that this is what India can contribute to the for the global environment and Bosch?
I think software is going to be a very critical parameter in this, given the central role software would take for itself in the future. I think this is going to be a very big value proposition.
Number one driver for you.
Absolutely. And the second part, of course, is electronics manufacture, and then localize as much as we can for the region and also for um, the other global requirements, depending on it's a case to case basis analysis, the classical components as well. But a single most thing would be the software.
Lastly, on since you are expecting a pretty healthy growth in the future, where doubling of contribution and value also increasing, what kind of investment would Bosch look at making in India? Would you need to hire people on the software front or some of the new businesses that you've talked about? And what potentially could be the challenge in front of the market? I mean, from a market perspective or from your internal organizational perspective when you look at achieving that long-term growth?
I think I would stay away from quoting any investment numbers, but we will stay invested in our engineering capabilities. I would broaden it as engineering, including software. And also manufacturing capabilities. And as I mentioned also in our earlier talk, we are also actively considering meaningful partnerships,
right,
in both manufacturing and portfolio or engineering space, in order to make better value propositions in this region.
Right. What are the challenges you feel on this path to faster growth, be it organizationally or out in the external world?
I think our ability to assimilate the tech stack and our ability to convert the changes which we notice in the market in a very rapid time cycles into the market would be a challenge. L&D, learning and development, would be the second. But I think as an engineering and as a strong engineering and manufacturing footprint based organization, we feel very confident about our ability to manage the future. But these are a couple of points which we need to be very sensitive about.
Right, Sandeep, appreciate your time, and we learned a lot listening to you. Thank you very much for talking to Autocar Pro.
Thank you very much,
Thank you,